Hello, my name is Ed Wolf and I serve in the Finance Office. Thank you for taking time to view this recording for the 2022 budget proposal. For the budget presentation, we will be referring to exhibit number 4. Pages 1 and 2 of the exhibit detail the budget proposal overview for all programs. A summary of each ministry area can be found on page 3. Pages 4 to 9 of the exhibit provide the core ministries project detail, and pages 10 and 11 of the exhibit detail our self-funding ministries budgets. Just to note that with the recommendation to merge Brethren Press and the core ministries, there is no 2022 budget information for Brethren Press on page 10 of the exhibit. Before we look at the numbers, let's begin with a few reminders. The core ministries expense parameter was approved at the June board meeting, with the anticipation that if there were any changes to the approved budget parameter because of the Brethren Press reimagining team recommendations, a revised parameter would be brought to the October board meeting. Since the June meeting, staff have worked to prepare budgets that live within the parameter set by the board. And with the Brethren Press recommendation, a revised budget parameter is being proposed at this meeting. And finally, this budget proposal includes income and expense for core ministries and self-funding ministries, along with budgeted allocations from the Emergency Disaster Fund and Global Food Initiative Fund. Let's begin with a review of the key components to the 2022 budget proposal. We are budgeting congregational giving and individual giving based on 10-year trends. Our draw percentages will remain unchanged for 2022, with a 17% draw from the Bequest Quasi-Endowment Fund, 5% draw from both the Savings and Endowment Funds, and an 8% draw from the BSC Quasi-Endowment Fund. We are budgeting $233,000 from the Ministry Enablement Contribution. This is based on a 5-year average of contributions to the Emergency Disaster Fund and Global Food Initiative Fund and other restricted giving. With the recommendation to merge Brethren Press and core ministries, there will be no gross sales contribution to core ministries. At the June board meeting, we had budgeted $48,000 as a gross sales contribution to core ministries for 2022. We are budgeting $257,000 from designated funds. We currently have $461,000 available in redirected one-time designated funds. This is from the 2020 core ministry surplus, the Everence insurance funds, and the church loan funds. To date, we have not used any of the $140,000 budgeted transfer from designated funds for this year, but we will make the transfer at year end if needed. If a portion of the 2021 designated funds transfer is unused at the end of this year, it would be available for use next year. While we hope we won't have to use all of the designated funds transfer amount, like the net income results we saw in both 2019 and 2020, we must plan for use of the entire budgeted amount in case the shortfall is not covered by additional income or expense reductions. The net of new expense reductions is $73,000. Since the parameter was approved in June, staff have received additional information on the medical insurance premium expense and Brethren Benefit Trust space reduction. These reductions will be specified in more detail as we review the budget proposal. There's a 2% increase in hourly wages, salaries, and benefits planned for 2022 at an expense of $54,000. We are also continuing with the employer contributions to our employees' health savings accounts. We had budgeted an 8% increase in medical insurance premiums, but we recently learned that the medical insurance premiums will decrease 1.5% over the 2021 rates. This is a savings of $52,000 from what we budgeted in June. We'll next turn to page 3 of the exhibit for a review of the changes to some of the core ministry income categories. We'll be comparing the 2022 proposed budget to the 2021 budget for net changes. The last 2 columns are highlighted on the slide to help focus on the numbers we'll be discussing. For congregational giving, we are budgeting $1.61 million. This budget is based on the 10-year giving trend, a decline of over 4% each year. We looked at a second scenario based on actual giving from 2020, but felt that it was not realistic given the declining trends and the increasing number of congregations leaving the denomination. This budget amount is $153,000 less than the 2021 budget amount. If we receive our 3-year average over this last quarter, we should expect to receive approximately $1.64 million from congregations this year. This is slightly higher than what we are budgeting for next year. For individual giving, we are budgeting $582,000. This budget is also based on the 10-year giving trend, an increase of almost 1.5% each year. This amount represents an increase of $49,000 from the 2021 budget. If we receive our 3-year average over this last quarter, we We should expect to receive approximately $595,000 from individuals this year. This is higher than what we are budgeting for next year. With the increases in individual giving over the last several years, we feel this is a realistic budget. In preparing the congregational individual giving budgets, we are extremely grateful for the meaningful work of our mission advancement staff as they continue to nurture relationships with our individual donors and congregations, especially given the difficulties of this season with no in-person donor visitations. Staff instead have focused on building relationships more purposefully with our congregations and making phone calls, sending emails, and mailing appreciation letters to everyone who donates, regardless of the donation amount. For the ministry enablement contribution amount, we are budgeting $233,000. This is down $28,000 from the 2021 budget. This amount is based on the 5-year average of donations to the Emergency Disaster Fund, Global Food Initiative Fund, and other restricted giving. With the recommendation to merge Brother Press into core ministries, we will not be budgeting a gross sales contribution. This is a $52,000 decrease from the 2021 budget. For service fee and other income, we are budgeting $150,000, an increase of $50,000 from this year's budget. This line item contains the Brethren Foundation service fee rebate, bank fees and interest, miscellaneous income and dividends, internal transfers, and the annuity endowment liability transfers. The largest amount from this budget is the Brethren Foundation rebate, and it has been steadily increasing over the past few years. With the increase in the service fee rebate, we felt we could increase this budget amount to $150,000. The actual average over the last 6 years for this line item is $155,000. We are budgeting $257,000 transfer from our designated funds. This is $117,000 higher than the 2021 budget. Just a reminder that in 2020, we transferred $200,000 from the core ministry surplus to designated funds for future budget shortfalls. We also have the church loan funds and other redirected designated funds if they are not needed for this year's budget. We hope not to have to use the designated funds, but we are thankful that we have funds available to fill the income shortfall. Over the last 3 budget cycles from 2018 to 2020, we have been blessed to only have to use $35,000 in designated funds to meet the income shortfalls. A final reminder on the income side with our draws in support of core ministries. We are not budgeting any changes to our draw percentages. Using a 5-year average has helped us reduce volatility in transfers, and our budget amounts have been consistent with actuals. The BSC quasi-endowment is still a little off budget because we don't quite yet have 5 years of history. We'll next look at expense changes to our core ministries budget. The director level expense summary is provided on page 3 of the exhibit with additional details on pages 4 through 9. We'll focus again on the 2 highlighted columns of the slide and discussing the year-to-year expense changes. The General Secretary's area includes mission advancement, human resources, communications, Brethren Press, Office of Peace Building and Policy, and the Ministry Office. For 2022, we are budgeting just over $2 million for the General Secretary's area. This represents a $79,000 decrease from 2021. Some of the more significant changes include removing funds for Brethren Press personnel under the communications budget, a $9,000 decrease in printing expenses for mission advancement, and a budgeted income of $13,000 for Brethren Press. Discipleship Ministries is budgeting $562,000 for 2022, an increase of approximately $13,000 from this year. Global Mission and Service is now split into 2 areas, Global Mission and Service Ministries. For Global Mission, we are budgeting $453,000 for 2022, a decrease of $12,000 from this year's budget. Global Mission is planning to increase travel expenses and annual conference expenses next year, but they are also budgeting more transfers from restricted funds to help offset their expenses. Service Ministries now include the Brethren Volunteer Service and the FaithX trips. For 2022, Service Ministries is budgeting $277,000, an increase of $35,000 from last year. This increase is mostly due to anticipated lower registration income from fewer FaithX trips being offered during a National Youth Conference year. Organizational resources includes Brethren Historical Library and Archives, Finance, Information Technology in Elgin and New Windsor, and Buildings and Grounds for both Elgin and New Windsor. For 2022, organizational resources is budgeting $1.65 million. This is $68,000 higher than the 2021 budget. Just to note that most of the organizational resources budgets are static in comparison with other program budgets that are more fluid, depending on the events and conferences they may have in any given year. The organizational resources budgets can also be more susceptible to product costs and contract variances. especially in the IT and building grounds departments. A few of the more notable increases include higher maintenance contracts and lease contracts for IT, a $62,000 anticipated loss in rental income from Brother and Benefit Trust due to their reduced space needs, higher insurance expense, and the addition of a full-time buildings and grounds assistant in Elgin. Some of the notable decreases to help offset some of these increased expenses include a decrease in independent contractor expense with no cleaning service, and a lower asset replacement expense because of retiring the old chillers for the less costly new system. Total core ministries expenses budgeted to be $4.959 million, an increase of $25,000 from 2021. In preparing our budgets for 2022, we anticipate that next year will be more of a normal year regarding the fulfillment of our core ministries and programs. We appreciate all our staff who carefully examined their program needs in preparing their 2022 budgets. We believe this budget to be realistic and an accurate reflection of what we hope to experience next year. On page 1 of the exhibit, you'll see a summary of the 2021 and 2022 budget comparisons for all ministries. A reminder that a year-over-year comparison is helpful as it helps to mitigate some of the seasonality that we may experience if we're looking at a quarter or a semi-annual report. Just a note that Brother and Press is listed separately on this exhibit to show the 2021 budget. However, if the recommendation is passed, Brother and Press will be merged with core ministries going forward and will not be listed separately on this report. Looking at the bottom of the exhibit, you will see that we are proposing an overall net expense for all ministries, moving from a 2021 budgeted income of $43,350 to a budgeted expense of $18,030 in 2022. We'll take a closer look at budgeted income and expense for all ministries on the next slide. On pages 3 through 9, we see the summary and detail for the core ministries budget. Starting on page 3, you will see that we are budgeting a break-even budget of $4.959 million in income and expense. On pages 4 through 9 of the exhibit, you will see more detail for each ministry area. We won't spend too much time going through this detail during this presentation. Just a reminder that income and expense numbers are separated between internal and external categories. Transfers between departments are considered internal. For example, annual conference meeting space and insight sessions or messenger advertising charged to a particular department. Transfers outside the organization are considered external. For example, staff travel, registration, salaries, and benefits. The ministry oversight unallocated line item in each ministry budget is typically the largest, as it includes expenses needed to carry out programs and staff time, including grants, salaries, travel, benefits, resource development, and program supplies. Most budgets also include an annual conference project to track expenses for the conference by each ministry area. You will see that the Brother and Press budgeted income of $13,000 is highlighted on page 5 of the exhibit. If the recommendation is approved, Brother and Press will be detailed within the core ministry's budget going forward. Some of the reasons Brother and Press is budgeting an income for 2022 include no longer having to pay the contribution of gross sales into core ministries, increasing sales over the devastating 2020 pandemic year, and looking forward to the publication of a book by Bob Neff and Chris Booker entitled Luke Acts. As part of core ministries, Brother and Press is committed to its mission of growing faith in collaboration with all the other ministries of the organization. On page 10, we'll find details for the material resources budget. Material resources is budgeting a net income of $21,000 for 2022. Material Resources is continuing partnerships with Brothers Brother, Church World Service, and Lutheran World Relief, and will continue to look for other partnerships to increase income. In reviewing and renewing service contracts, Material Resources has also adjusted their fees to increase income. Staff and board are working on developing a new ministry business plan for Material Resources, with the hope of finding additional revenue streams and expense reductions. The hope is that Material Resources will be able to return to more normal operations in 2022, returning to pre-pandemic levels of donations, while welcoming back volunteers to the warehouse to process quilts, medical supplies, and increase trucking services among their partners. The conference office can also be found on page 10 of the exhibit. For 2022, the conference office is budgeting a net expense of $39,000. Factors for the budgeted loss include decreased income for registration fees and increases in costs related to travel, audiovisual, and insurance. Also, annual conference offerings continue to be divided among ministries. In the past, annual conference received all income from the offerings. Turning to page 11, you'll find the 2022 budgets for Brother and Disaster Ministries and Global Food Initiative. The Brother and Disaster Ministries budget is a break-even budget with a transfer from the Emergency Disaster Fund. Project allocation expenses are budgeted to be $18,500, higher than the 2021 budget. And the continuation of the Nigeria crisis response will have a budget of $183,000 in 2022. The Global Food Initiative budget is also a break-even budget with a transfer from the Global Food Initiative Fund. For 2022, we are budgeting $27,000 lower in expenses. On this slide, we will detail how we got from the approved Core Ministries budget parameter in June to the revised budget proposal, including the Brother and Press recommendation. You will remember that the budget parameter from the June board meeting was $4.983 million. There was a $7,000 adjustment that needed to be made on the 2022 budget roll forward to increase the parameter. Reductions to the parameter include the 2022 budgeted income of $13,000 for Brother and Press and the $52,000 in medical insurance premium savings. The additional expenses increases includes the net of removing Brother and Press personnel salary benefits from the communications budget and Core Ministries, the anticipated rental income loss from BBT's space reduction, and increases or reductions in departmental budgets. With these changes, the revised Core Ministries parameter is $4.959 million. This is down $24,000 from the parameter in June. The grand totals for all ministries can be found on page 1 of the exhibit near the bottom. We are budgeting income of $7.82 million and expense of $7.84 million with budgeted net expense of $18,000. This is about $300,000 less in income and expense when compared to the 2021 budget. Just a reminder that net asset balances are based on 2020 actual plus 2021 and 2022 budgeted net income expense. If 2021 does not turn out as budgeted, the net asset numbers for 2022 will be affected. The 2022 budget recommendation for all ministries, Core Ministries and self-funding ministries, is on page 2 of the exhibit. A reminder that the Emergency Disaster Fund and Global Food Initiative Fund allocations include ministry enablement contributions of $169,000 for Brother and Disaster Ministries and $22,000 for Global Food Initiative. As mentioned earlier, this budget proposal includes transfers from Bequest Quasi-Endowment at 17%, BSC Quasi-Endowment at 8%, Endowment Fund and Savings Fund at 5%, and use of the designated funds in the amount of $257,000. We are especially grateful to our staff as they did a very thorough job of reviewing their budgets and managing expenses for the coming year, especially given the continuing challenges of the pandemic and budgeting for potential unknowns next year. Thank you for this time to report on the 2022 budget recommendation. We look forward to our meeting time together.